let's move away and let's go on to Taiwo, our guest presenter this week. We got a fourth one. We got a third one in. So Taiwo, you were going to talk about a show called Last Chance You,
Yes, yes, I
and
was. So,
this is something that has come out of your love of sports documentaries.
yeah, yeah. So, growing up, loved everything sports, most sports, anything I get my hands on would get involved and play it. And so, interestingly, when just before uni, got involved in American football, and that's what kind of drew me to this because I played American football as well. So, it was just interesting and just to see what happens within the march or the movement of people into the NFL. So the NFL, National Football League, American Football League, for American football. And so it was interesting because Last Chance You, Netflix documentary, started in 2016. What they did was they went to something called the junior colleges. So I'll just take a minute to just quickly explain the college system because it's so complicated and so far devoid from what we
From
have
from,
in the
from
UK.
anything in the UK, yeah.
Yeah. So what they normally do is you go to high school. So if you're a really good American football player, you play in high school, you get seen by a college, you go to the college, you play for that college, and then when you finish at college, you go into the NFL draft, and that gets you into the NFL. But what happens if either you go to college and you have a legal issue? So you have a situation where one of the students punched a girl in a bar and got thrown out of the college. You have an issue where you had some kids involved in burglary. You had another kid who wouldn't stop smoking weed and eventually got thrown out of college. What do you do? So what they do is they then go to something called a junior or community college to
Oh
try
yeah,
and prove that they can get themselves straight, that they can manage to keep up with the academic work, to then give them another chance to go back into the bigger colleges, to then get back into the NFL. So it's almost like a second chance or last chance university.
yeah.
So if you don't make it at that college or university, you're not going to make it into the NFL basically. So that's what it is, and it's just interesting because it is very gritty and very raw. So you have the first two seasons are at a university called the Eastern Mississippi Community College, and basically you see, and they're very upfront about what these I say kids, young men have done to be in that situation. So they're very clear. Like you had one who was involved in a burglary. You had one who'd been to jail and come back out again. And then you also had other kids in the community college because it's cheaper than university. You can go to a community college and you can do a 2-year degree, almost like a bachelor's,
Yeah.
before going to the big uni to do a master's, basically. But what I loved about the show is it doesn't shy away from the nastier side of things when it comes to college being a business. It's
Yeah.
basically just a business. It is these kids come through, they're there to entertain or to make money for the college, and they pass out again, and that's it. And they come in, the coaches use them because they want to be the ones who say, we won a state championship. They
Yeah.
get to have a ring, the kids move out. And it's interesting because the first 4 seasons, so you have 2 years at Eastern Mississippi, you have 2 years at Independence in Kentucky. Those first 4 seasons, the coaches, you can see, it's very evident that as much as they say they care for the children, they don't. They are very much all about results. If you can't get
Uh,
me the result I want, so
is that you're just fodder for my ambitions?
very much so, very much so. And it's interesting because actually one of the assistant coaches tells the kids, "You're here to help me and my family get to a better college. So
Oh
I'm using
wow.
you." But then he says, "You need to use me as well, though. You need to be clear that make sure you use my time to try and improve yourself to know where you're going."
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things that was interesting because they're very upfront about it. Whereas you wouldn't get this in a normal NFL documentary because the NFL is all about PR and
Yeah.
shiny and clean.
Yeah. And this is wonderful. This is Americans' pastime, and this is puritanical. There's nothing wrong here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. This
Drug
is
use?
this
What
is the
drug use?
dream.
What's a drug?
But yeah, yeah. What abuse? No. So yeah, so it just shows that, and I think that's one of the reasons I really liked the show because it made that clear. And what's very sad about it, and I had to catch myself thinking about it, was as entertaining as it is, it was then almost stepping back and realizing that these are real people
Yeah.
And these are real men who are struggling, young men. I mean, they call them young men, but they still feel like kids because they're 18, 19. I mean, you had one example where you had one of the players was, he had two children by that point. It was at that college. And he would basically, because of childcare and his wife at that point was still going through college, he would have his daughter in the pram in the at the stadium training. So she'd be on the sidelines, he'd be doing training, he'd hear her crying, have to run out to get her, come back again and keep going.
Oh, wow.
So it is absolutely brilliant. And I mean, just the first season ends on basically Eastern Mississippi. They're going towards the playoffs. They're doing really well. Their last match is against a rival community college. A fight breaks out, and literally all the players are involved. And because of that, they don't make it to the playoffs.
Oh.
And it's just like, wow. Like, and it's almost like you can't film it. This isn't a film. You couldn't put that in a film script. So you think, oh, that's ridiculous. But actually, this is what has happened and what's gone on. So that's the first 4 seasons. And then I think they kind of clicked that by the time we got to the 5th season, okay, we need to show that not all the coaches are horrible people. Because particularly, I mean, the 3rd and 4th season, the coach for Independence was just a horrible man, basically. And his stance was, I grew up in Compton, you know, born and bred there. I played football there, and I know the hardships there, and therefore I'm just very hard, and I just say it as it is. And I'm like, no, actually, no, you're just not a very nice person. You are literally just the stuff he does. And he eventually gets fired at the end of the 4th season because of his treatment, his bullying of some of the young people.
Okay, well, so last chance, you've been enjoying it, and I was just telling you a little bit about how I saw it, and I wasn't sure whether it was like I wasn't sure whether it was a drama series like Friday Night Lights or whether it was a documentary thing or anything like that. So the question I want to ask is this just X Factor with helmets and pads on a gridiron?
I'm gonna sit on the fence and say yes in some ways and no in some ways. So it is, because it's basically a group of people trying to show their talents for other people to see and, you know, get paid from that. I think it's not, because unlike X Factor, where all they do is they promote the person at the front, they promote the groups or whatever to say, look how great they are, look how wonderful they are. They actually show the kids in the light of they are. Like, they're very real about them. And I think one of the things that struck me was there was one of the players, Malik Henry. He's a quarterback. This guy is like an unbelievable talent. He got kicked out of the uni he was going to because there were some problems. He comes to this junior college, and you just watch him, and he's just self-destructing repeatedly. So he's arguing with the coaches. He doesn't bother doing any of his academic work, which you have to do in order to get to the college stage. Yeah. And I think that's something you wouldn't see in X Factor. In X Factor, they would definitely keep that under wraps, and maybe you'd find that out a few years later that this is what happened. So I think in that sense, no, that's
But when you were talking about the guy who had his daughter by the side of the pitch and, like, you know, would rush up to go look at daughter and everything, that's total X Factor. That's the kind of thing that I imagine that X Factor would be like, oh, look, sub story, crank it up, crank up the music, how sad is this? Okay, with all that, it sounds like you really like it. How many stars would you give Last Chance U?
So I think I would give it a 4. I think instead of giving it a 5, I think I'll probably give it a 4, because sadly, I think it gets a bit repetitive. I think they went on a bit too long with it, and then they've now done a Last Chance U basketball one as well, which I haven't seen. Yeah. But I think from what it is, from what it shows, and for just how open and honest it was, particularly when it first came out, there wasn't much that was very open and gritty about. Literally, we've got cameras everywhere. We see everything in every conversation, and it's not filtered. I think, what it was, really good. So,
all right, cool. For that. Oh, and final question:
do you need to have an interest in American football to get into it, or is it just enough of a human story? Because obviously, for these young men, this is probably their one opportunity to raise themselves and their families in a broader sense out of the situations that they're in, into the big money if they get into the NFL. presumably.
Yeah, I think it's no, definitely it's more of a human story, because I mean I haven't timed it, but looking at the episodes, the longest you get, they're normally about an hour long. The longest you have of them showing you what's happening in on the field during a game is maybe 5 or 6 minutes. The rest of it is all about what's going on, particularly with also their academic teachers as well. They spend a lot of time with interviewing the teachers to show this is what they're doing to try and get them ready for college, as it were, or the big bad world.
Yeah, because presumably getting a good education will help improve their lot as well. So
yeah, and you meet one or two who do tweak onto that and decide that they're just trying to get to college to get a good education because they know they're not going to make it to the NFL, but at least they can get free education and a free scholarship.
Cool.
All right, now, okay, we spent too long on this and we need to move on.
Sorry.
But no, it's all good stuff. And I keep coming up with questions that I think are good anyway. My next question was going to be, how does it compare to All or Nothing on Amazon Prime? If you've seen any of those, but never mind, we don't have time for that. We got to move on.